Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. My name is Dan Lorman. I am the Field CISO with Presidio, former Chief Security Officer for the state of Michigan. Background was at the National Security Agency and was in England with Lockheed and Mantech before that. We have a really outstanding panel today. Real excited about each of our panelists. I'm going to let them introduce themselves in a moment. This is going to be about hot topics for CISOs. I will tell you that some of you are probably wondering where's Sean Sebastian. He's on the list. Unfortunately, he was not able to join us today. So Sean will not be with us, but we do have two outstanding leaders here with us. I'm going to start with Nancy Ranasek, who's the former CISO for the state of Texas, and she's now a senior advisor to the Texas government on cybersecurity. Nancy, welcome, and please tell us about your background and your role.
Good afternoon, and first I want to thank the InCyber Forum for having me come to this event. I was here last year, and I really, really think this is a special occasion for all of us to gather together. As Dan said, my name's Nancy Ranasek. I've been with the state of Texas for over 40 years. I started when I was like in elementary school.
3 years old.
But I worked with the state auditor's office for quite a while. I was an IT auditor, which I really hated right out of school because these people had been doing these jobs for a lot of years, and I was coming in telling them what they were doing wrong after just graduating from college. So it didn't feel good to me. So I moved in and became their CIO, eventually moving to the Health and Human Services Commission, which a lot of money rolls through that place because of all the benefits that they provide to citizens in Texas. And then I became the state CISO, and I've been in that role for 7.5 years. I stepped down about a month ago, and my shoulders are really feeling great these days. So, and I'm going to send it to Sue.
Yeah, thanks so much. As mentioned, we have Sue McCauley, who's the Vice President of North America and Head of Cybersecurity at High Speed Rail Solutions. Sue, welcome.
Yeah. Hi, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you again for InCyber Forum for inviting me here. I'm speaking again tomorrow on OT stage, talking about operational technologies. For this afternoon, obviously talking about the challenges for CISOs in the age of AI. My background has been, I've been with High Speed Rail Solutions for 6 months now, based in Toronto. And the company basically works on safety assurance for infrastructure rail, and I'm bringing a cybersecurity perspective to that. Prior to this role, I was with NEOM in Saudi Arabia for 4.5 years, looking at cybersecurity across a whole range of operational technologies and ICS for critical infrastructure that they're building everything up once from scratch. So fascinating project to work on, but it was too darn hot, 52 degrees in the summer, so I had to get away. And now I'm over here, so I'll be freezing in a few weeks and complaining about that as well. Prior to that, I worked with the UK. I was a CISO for Unipark Group for a year as an interim, and prior to that, I was with the Atomic Weapons Establishment in the UK for another 3.5 years. So that's my background, and I started when I was 25, so that makes me about 35 now. So there you go, Nancy.
Yes, we have two outstanding women leaders here in cybersecurity. Really excited about this, and I'm going to, with Sean Sebastian not being here, I'm going to actually throw in a few stories from my CISO background with the state of Michigan and other roles I played in the private sector. But Nancy, I want to start with you. You know, we're going to divide this into 3 parts. So in the beginning, we're going to talk about threats, the challenges we're facing as CISOs around the world, what's top of mind for CISOs right now, and then we're going to talk about some solutions in the second part, and then the last section, we're going to take 10 minutes of questions at the end. So we really want to hear your questions, so get your questions ready. Try and stump an outstanding panel. We'll give you a shot at that. So start with Nancy. Nancy, what are the top cyber threats that we're seeing now that the state of Texas is facing every day?
I feel like a broken record when I talk about ransomware, phishing, business email compromise. When I first took on the role, we were primarily looking at state agencies, and under my department, it was state agencies and institutions of higher education that are funded by the state. As the world has evolved, we've evolved, and so now we're looking at local government. So when you look at the state, and I always talk about how big Texas is, and now I'm in Quebec, which is probably twice or over twice our size. We have 1,200 school districts, 900 cities, 254 counties. We have over 7,000 public water systems in Texas. So when you think about protecting state agencies, that's one thing. But I always believe that the lower you go in government, the closer you get to the citizens. And that's where we want to have an impact, because the citizens don't, I mean, it's not like you can go to Walmart or Amazon or whatever. You can have a choice. You don't have a choice when you're a citizen of Texas. You have to do some business with us. So it's very important that we protect the citizens and we protect the funding. And the funding in Texas overall is about $194 billion a year. That's overall Texas state government. That doesn't include the locals. It includes some of the locals, but they have their own taxing authorities and their own governance processes as well. So trying to delve into all that from a statewide perspective is very difficult and very complex. It took us a while even to get a local reporting bill where they had to report their incidents to us, but we are making progress. We've had over 200 ransomware attacks in Texas, state, local, and university, school districts, etc. I'm proud to say that less than 5% of those have been state impacted. It's mainly city, county, and school districts, and the school districts are getting hit hard. And a lot of the things that we're seeing now from that local reporting bill is about people being phished and what happens as a result of that. Because once they get phished and their passwords are found, then they've got the keys and they can get in. So it's very important that, I mean, education's important. There's a lot of things that are important in that regard.
Sue, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so from my perspective, because I've been working in critical infrastructure for some time, it's seeing this exponential increase in nation-state attacks on critical infrastructure. And looking across the board, it's seeing the vulnerabilities that we have in our critical infrastructure and understanding that it's all at risk, it's all a threat. In real terms, we've got to pay more attention to how we're going to defend that critical infrastructure and being aware that it's just going to go on increasing. Now that they've found their way into the critical infrastructure, it'll be finding more and more ways to attack it, to paralyze us over periods of time. And you've only got to look at Cuba in the last week or so, where they've had the power outages, not caused by cyber, but the impacts of that blackout have been phenomenal across the country. So we've got to look at how is that going to affect us in the US, in Canada, in the UK, across the world. All countries need to be paying attention to how they're managing that.
Great, thank you for that. So probably won't be a big surprise. We heard in the opening session around AI and the challenges that AI are facing. I just want to recommend one book. If you haven't read it yet, this is not my book. I've written a couple other books, but this was a number one New York Times bestseller called Co-Intelligence by Ethan Mollick, M-O-L-L-I-C-K, and it's Living and Working with AI. And it talks about the world that we're in, where whether we use it in our workplace or not, it's happening all around us. AI is showing up in more and more ways. Last night, one section, I was going to read you a section. I'm just going to jump right to our panelists on this. We had a session trying to decipher what was a fake photography image and what was AI generated. And it was fascinating to watch that process and very, very difficult. And one of the things he says in the book, he talks about AI is notoriously bad at finding other AI mistakes. And so having ways that we can work with AI, use AI to help mitigate the risks, but also AI is being used against us. So with that, Nancy, I want to go to you. How do you see the world changing around you as you think about AI and the attacks and what's coming next?
Well, first I can talk about phishing, because one of the main things that we've told employees over the years is to look for obvious grammar errors, look for misspelled words, because they're coming from foreign nations where English isn't their first language, and AI is making it hard to discern what's real and what's not in regard to the language that's spoken. And that's going to have a big impact on us. It's really kind of a hard time to step down from this job because AI is very exciting, but there is a lot of risk.
Sue, when we think about this, I want to get your response, and also bring in critical infrastructure and how you see AI impacting that.
So to be fair, I would say not so much in terms of critical infrastructure, because I don't think it penetrates that far in. But what I would say is that 80% of attacks across the board on IT or OT come through individuals, human beings. We're the weakest link. We're the ones that get fooled by the phishing attacks. We're the ones that get the deep fakes and don't understand that they are deep fakes. We saw some of that last night. And in real terms, it's getting harder to discern what the fakes look like. How do you distinguish between something that's legitimate and something that's completely artificial?
Yeah. Nancy, one more aspect of AI is people talk about ethics and trust, and the large language models. Can you trust the data? Can you trust the results and what it's saying? The ambitions to utilize AI more broadly across business is increasing, but there also are risks that are increasing using AI. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think that there always has to be a human element involved. I know that when ChatGPT first came out, I did a search on myself, and a lot of it was pretty fake. And so you got to know, and you got to have trust, and gaining that trust is going to be difficult.
Sue?
Yeah, so I would add to what you've just said, Nancy, and say that there are deliberate attempts to poison the data, to pollute the data. We've seen it happening across the board where internationally the nation states are coming into that data wells and adding malicious information or disinformation, misinformation. So what we think we're getting as a result that tells us new things, new facts, new ways to go forward is actually just not there. It's not true. It's not real. You do have to test it. You do have to do some checking on everything that you read and make sure that it is real.
I think also a lot of people think if you see it, you believe it. And I'll tell you, and I really don't want to get into this much, but I was on Twitter a few days ago, and there was a video of Kamala Harris, and they were like, look, she's drunk again. And it was her it was really weird. But then the next day I saw another that showed that they had actually slowed the video down. It was the actual video. They slowed it down so she appeared to be impaired in some way, but when you saw the actual real video, she wasn't. So that's the type of misinformation and how they're using that to potentially impact our democracy.
Influencing.
So I want to move to the second part now, and again, get your questions ready here. In about 15 minutes, we can take some questions from the audience. But Nancy, so we have all these attacks coming. You mentioned ransomware, 200 ransomware attacks. We talk about this unprecedented number of accelerating threats facing the state of Texas. So what are you doing practically to combat these threats now in Texas?
So first off, we've set up a program. We call it TexRAMP. It's the Texas Risk Authorization and Management Program. It's very similar to FedRAMP, but it's a lot easier and less time-consuming. Any state agency or university that wants to purchase a cloud computing product, that product has to be certified by our office. So we're using the NIST 853 guidelines to drive that compliance program and make sure that the people that we're spending money with to process or store our data are using the same controls that we require of state agencies. That it kind of came about because of some incidents that happened. One was it was a small cloud company, and they were holding information about law enforcement officers, and they had their home addresses and names of their and identities of their family members, and somebody got access and leaked it, and we asked the CEO of that company, are you going to hire a CISO now? Because he really had poor cyber hygiene, and his response was, I'm not going to pay somebody 6 figures to run around behind me and tell me what to do. And, you know, I was kind of amazed at that answer, because this was something that could really put people's lives at risk, and I didn't see the seriousness being taken with what had happened with that data. Another thing that we're doing, and this has to do probably with the scale of Texas, is we're setting up regional security operations centers in our universities, and we're funding it through our legislative process. We have 3 that are up and running now, but we've divided the state into economic development regions, and our goal is to have one of these RSOCs is what we call them, in each of those regions eventually. In doing this, we've got people close by that can help respond to cyber incidents for local governments and school districts, etc. And we're also, more importantly, educating students so that we are putting out experienced, qualified cyber people through these university programs. So it's been a very big success so far, and we just hope it continues.
So Sue, you're working now in Toronto. You worked in the UK. You've got a lot of contacts all over the world. Actually, you're in Saudi Arabia as well. What are you seeing as the most effective ways to combat cyber threats today?
Sorry, missed that.
The most effective, what are you seeing used by organizations to combat cyber threats?
Okay, so I mean, AI is not all bad. I'm not a big fan, as you've gathered by now, but it can be used for fantastic data analytics. I think we've got to frame and scope exactly what we want AI to do. And I think, you know, if you put it as part of your defense, it is there to filter some of the information to help you to understand what the threats look like, what anomalies look like, how to baseline what normal traffic looks like on your internet, on your information flows, and then identify the anomalies. What it won't do is it won't identify zero-day attacks, because it just doesn't recognize the signature. So it's good for that.
So, like, what are you seeing, Sue, back to you, are some of the beneficial processes that can take advantage of AI? I mean, what should organizations be doing that you see that they're not doing now around, you know, utilizing AI and its, you know, to help?
I just think looking at what the solutions are and being proportionate in your response. Most organizations don't have tons of money to spend on cyber, so it's about being clear about what you're going to get out of each of your defensive layers, how to spend wisely, what's your return on investment, making sure you're looking at the business risk and being able to associate the spend with the benefit, and that means potentially using AI more effectively where you can to do some of that analytics work.
Fantastic. So a couple more questions here. I'm going to go jump to the audience. I've got enough questions. We only got 20 minutes left and tons of questions here. But Nancy, to you, how are you approaching vendors with their inclusion of AI in products that you're currently using? So, I mean, you're seeing that all over the place. What's your approach to that?
I think it all comes down to your contracts and your terms and conditions and the lawyers, and making sure that our contracts are solid in what they can do and what they can't do with our data. because at the end of the day, it's the citizens' data, and we have a real responsibility to protect that. And by having a company take that data and use it in their models, we don't believe that is the right thing for our citizens.
So I want to just elaborate on that a minute for Nancy, back to you, but I know a lot of states around, and probably, I'm sure it's popular in Canada as well, they have policies around what employees can and can't do with AI. I mean, talk to us about governance and, people, a common phrase being used now is bring your own AI. So even if you ban it in your government or in your local government or hospital or group, they can still bring it in on their smartphone. They can still use it other ways. How are you thinking about that from a governance perspective in the state of Texas?
We have an AI council that was established by our legislature last session, and they're working through all of the governance issues so that our hope is that when that report's released and our next session, there'll be more guidance that comes from our legislature. I know that within DIR, where I work, we have a process for employees that they need to get approval before using AI. I'll also tell you, we had one agency that sent over an incident, and it was an HR employee that was uploading workers' comp information to determine and help them do the calculations. And they uploaded all the personal information of those employees to ChatGPT. Their security officer then had to contact ChatGPT to get that information taken off. And so it's very important that education exists and that we really scan for data loss on our networks.
So Sue, last question for you, then I'm going to open up to the audience. Overall, are you thinking the expectations of AI, are they realistic, unrealistic? Where are we at right now as we head into 2025 and you think about, and there's a whole other session tomorrow on predictions for the future, but from your perspective, what are you seeing around expectations with AI in cybersecurity?
So I don't know how many of you watch Brian Krebs on LinkedIn, but he had a great picture up a couple of days ago. There was a young girl pinned against a wall with a tuba in her face, and another girl kind of playing that tuba at her, and the little girl against the wall represented all of us, and the girl with the tuba was every company trying to tell you about the benefits of AI. And it was just like, not real, come on. AI doesn't do everything. AI can be quite superficial. There are a lot of expectations about what AI can do, how AI can inform us. Sorry guys, but all of that information has already been created and it's just now being recirculated. So it's got all of the biases in there. It's got the cognitive bias, the discrimination bias. It's got no ethics of its own. And we're just rereading stuff that's been published previously. So please be cautious. I mean, I've got people that I've worked with who would come and bring me a report and show me this report really proudly, English absolutely perfect, but the content was missing. No nuance, no context, no insight, no facts, no real meat in the report. And it's just like, what have you just given me? It's just some perfectly written nonsense. So there's still a long way to go before that generates some information that we're all going to find valuable and useful to us in real terms. Keep reading the books, keep getting people going out and writing stuff, doing the research, understanding the source of the information so that we're reading factual information, not something that AI has generated, and then you don't know just how real it is.
Fantastic, thank you. So I want to open up to the audience. Now I have more questions I'm happy to answer, but we'd like to take some questions from the audience. So if you could come up to the microphone, which is right here in the middle, we'd appreciate it. If you can stand up, I'm sure there must be some great questions out there. So start with that. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, so we are talking to CISO, so we will stay on governance, okay? We will not deep dive on technicals, okay? So we have AI, we have CISO, we have their concern, okay? So if we think about the NIST core framework, okay? So you are more on the govern, identify, protect, and detect. You're here, okay?
Yep.
So I do understand that you say, okay, we can use AI to detect better, okay, which is great. Okay, this is fine. But as CISO, because what I'm seeing in the forum last year and this year, we talk more about the proactiveness, okay, of cybersecurity. We talk less about the reactiveness of cybersecurity, that is the respond and recover, okay? You as CISO, you are CISO, you have AI. It's clear about your govern, identify, protect, detect. This is clear. Use AI, okay. But as CISO, what would you recommend on the reactiveness part, okay? More precisely, on the respond and recover. We got a cyber attack, we are hit, we are down, okay? What do you recommend? AI is here, what do we do? Thank you.
Nancy, I want to start with you. What we're rephrasing, he said we have, detect, respond, recover. We've got NIST standards. We got how do you use AI to recover? How do you use AI to respond to an incident? How can AI help us?
I've been looking at AI from that protect and identify, and I haven't quite figured out how that we can use it for response, except for if I'll go to the schools or the counties where the person in charge of cybersecurity also mows the yard or drives the bus. And so there could be beneficial uses to help them get through their cyber incident by instructing them along the way. I don't know that they really need AI to do that, because to me it's a playbook.
So I
Sue,
think
go ahead.
I think you're absolutely right, Nancy. I think it does take you into the playbook. I think what we'd be looking for is for it to stop the ransomware, for it to identify we've now got a ransomware attack, and that's it. Press the button, stop it right now, because it goes through your system so damn quick. If you don't stop it instantly, everything's gone. So I think that's where AI could be of assistance. But again, I don't think it's got a widespread assist at this point in time. I think if you've got preset playbooks and it can alert you to, here's a set of circumstances, this attack or this event looks like it meets these prerequisites, then this is the playbook you need to apply and get started on it right now. That's the only thing I think. Perhaps over time it will be more beneficial.
Yeah, I would just add one other thing to that, and that is that almost every vendor out there, with almost every tool set you see in the industry, it's almost like you could say it's pixie dust, but AI is a part of every product now. So as they detect and hopefully in many cases automatically shut down, but maybe not, maybe they do, they have AI built into those tool sets. So you're seeing more and more of that really across all the vendors on the show floor. They all claim to have different aspects of AI built into their tool sets. So it does make it a little difficult in some cases to know exactly how well will they be able to detect and be able to shut down and not let things spread across your enterprise. But that's another piece of what you're asking. Yeah, go ahead. Next question.
Good afternoon. Lawrence from the Dutch Embassy in Ottawa. Great panel. Thank you, Dan, Nancy, Sue. Dan, you referenced a book from Ethan Mollick, but I actually read your book, your latest book, Cyber Mayday and the Day After. Yep. And in your book, you emphasize the importance of learning from past cyber incidents in order to prevent new ones. And I was actually wondering, what are some of the most common mistakes that you see organizations make, and what advice would you have to sort of break that circle effectively?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. Really appreciate it. So, Cyber May Day and the day after, for those who haven't read the book, it's true stories about ransomware. What happened in the C-suite when the ransomware attack hit? You know, not just from the CISO perspective, but CEO, COO, CFO. So a couple things I would mention. One, communication is huge. So no matter any kind of incident in enterprise, when the government, we're big for saying a multi-approach, whether it be fire, flood, tornado, natural disaster, whatever the emergency is, you have to have a plan. So knowing that really whatever organizations in your company, in your government, they all need to be involved. So communication, how are you going to communicate? What is the role for each individual part of that? So communication is the number one issue. How are you going to talk, not just with your technical team? How are you going to talk to the press? How are you going to talk to the private sector? How are you going to talk to other people in the business? How are you going to talk to your clients? Those are big issues. That's one, communication, communication, communication. And usually when you have a ransomware attack, companies or businesses or governments do well with one or two groups, but they don't do well with all the different groups. So that's one thing. Another one would be to make sure that when a ransomware attack often hits, and this is a very practical thing. I love, Nancy, you can jump in on this in a minute. A lot of times the bad actors, you heard that in the session earlier this morning, will encrypt your network first and the backups. So it's amazing how many people, first of all, it's all about people, process, and technology. So they'll encrypt the plan. So it's amazing how many people, the ransomware hits, they can't even access the plan. They don't have a hard copy. The plan is encrypted. Who you're going to call is encrypted. They don't even know how to communicate because they don't have a copy. Their plan is not available. I see that. And then in addition to that, another big one, I learned this during 20 years ago when the Northeast blackout hit in the United States. We had the real blackout hit from Michigan, Ohio, New York, Boston, all blacked out. And we had the Emergency Coordination Center in Michigan activated. I was the emergency coordinator for IT. And about, initially, 2/3 of the people never showed up. And then 24 hours later, it was about 1/3 never showed up. Then you say, why? Well, it was, a lot of them were on vacation. Some of them just went home. They were supposed to be at the Emergency Coordination Center. They didn't come. So what does that have to do with ransomware? Well, a lot. So who are your experts? How many of you do tabletop exercises? Raise your hand. Tabletop. A lot of people do. Okay, great. So I'm glad you do exercises. I'll give you a little tip. Next time you do one, don't tell the team this. Walk up and tap 1/3 of the people on the shoulder and say you have the day off. You can either watch, you can go back to your desk, but you cannot communicate with anybody in the room. And they say, why? Because you're on vacation. You're in Germany right now on vacation. You're not here. You are not here when this happens. And interesting, it's funny what happens oftentimes. One of the things they do is they start in about 5 minutes. I've seen this happen 3 or 4 times. They try to negotiate. They say, well, you know, I don't know why, but you happen to pick Frank. He's our smartest guy. You can't have Frank. Can you take Sarah the intern instead of Frank? You know, they want to trade people. Why? Because we need Frank. He is our plan. We can't survive without that individual. But in real life, that's not what happens. If Frank is on vacation in Germany, he's not there. So what are you going to do now? So we rely on certain things. We rely on communication. We rely on the plan that may be encrypted. We rely on certain people that may not be available. So what is your backup plan if your top people aren't available? So having backup, not just one person who can do it all, because Murphy's Law says that's the person that's going to be on vacation when the ransomware hits. So you've got to be ready for that. I mean, Nancy, you can talk about some of the things you've learned.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. When I took this job in 2017, we had a bill. It was the Texas Cybersecurity Act. And one piece of that bill was to develop a statewide incident response plan. And naively, I thought, well, this is what happens if a bunch of state agencies go down. You know, we can't pay the bills, or we can't look at elevators, or whatever. And so we formed a team, and it consisted of our military department, our Division of Emergency Management, our Department of Public Safety, several people. And we developed this plan. And the military department had developed quite a bit of expertise in responding to cyber events. And so but we didn't know how to activate them. So we did all this research and figured that out. And we figured out, well, the governor has to issue a disaster, but at the time, a cyber event didn't fall under that disaster declaration. So we pushed to have that pass the next session, so that in the event of a cyber attack, we could have the same resources that we would have for a flood, a fire, a hurricane, etc. And we met with these people, we practiced, we did tabletops, and lo and behold, in 2019, we started getting calls from local governments, help, we've been hit with ransomware. And it used to be a joke with me and my deputy that when he called me on a Friday, it meant it was going to be a long weekend. And we had to get some people out there. In August of 2019, we had 23 local governments that were hit with ransomware. And that's when we really put that plan into action. And it really showed us that we really did have a great capability in Texas for responding. But there was a lot of distance to cover, because it was a managed service provider that was hit, and then subsequently the locals were hit, and they were all over Texas. So some locations took 8 hours to drive to just to get there and say, hey, we're from the state, we're here to help. And that's part of the reason that we started doing the regional cybersecurity operations centers, was so that we had people locally. Another thing we learned was we had a ton of vendors calling us. We can help, we can help, we can help. Well, we couldn't accept the help because of CISO requirements and background checks and all of that. So we set up a volunteer incident response team as a result. One of the main things, though, that we learned is about communication. And I'd worked a lot of cyber incidents, and usually you're stuck in a room eating from the candy machine for hours, and your boss you're just kind of texting or emailing and keeping them up to date. Well, in this event, my executive director came down to the operations center and sat with us, and it was tremendous that we had somebody there helping us with the communications, because we had people from all over the world wanting us to respond to what was going on in Texas. And so all of that was critical, and we learned a lot from the event, but we also learned that we could do it, and we had all 23 up in less than a week. Well, it was 7 days. So it was an amazing experience with lots of lessons learned.
So we got about 3 minutes left. I want to just ask each of our panelists, each of us may take 1 minute each. Sue, we'll start with you. Any final words for the audience from a CISO leadership perspective or senior perspective? What one thing would you want them to take away from the session, or one thing would you want them to remember about the session, say a week from now, if they thought back to this event? Sue, we'll start with you, then we'll go to Nancy, and I'll have one at the end. So Sue, start with you.
So I would say, if you're in a crisis, stay calm. Everybody's looking at you. Everybody's looking at you to come up with the answers. If you haven't done your homework, if you haven't got prepared first, you're in trouble. So everything that everybody's said so far is always, when I first joined Unipart, the first thing they wanted from me was to have an emergency plan, a crisis plan, so they knew exactly what they were going to do, having a plan, knowing how to activate it, getting people on board, and having all of your comms pre-drafted so that you just have to tailor it for the event is a lifesaver. That's for me.
Great. Nancy?
I think finding trusted allies. Sometimes I think of this as kind of like a war that's going on, and we're fighting it with many, many armies. You know, being a state CISO, there's 50 of us, and it's amazing the things I've learned or the events that I've heard about by communicating across the United States with these people, and the help that you can get by having those trusted allies.
Yeah, so mine is similar to that last one, but a little different. So we obviously have to work in partnership, as Nancy mentioned. But as a CISO, I think the number one thing I learned over 10 years in Michigan was you've got to build trust. You've got to be a trusted ally to the business area, because when a ransomware attack comes and it hits your government or it hits your business, the question that senior leadership is going to ask is, can I trust this person to lead us out of this mess? We're in a crisis. Are you the person who's going to get us out of that crisis? And if you've been Dr. No for 5 years, 10 years, you're the guy that always says no, the answer is no, what was the question? If that's how you're known in the organization, they will bring in another team to actually get them out of the ransomware attack. They will not look to you to solve it. So you've got to get to yes. You've got to be someone who's trusted by the leadership. You need to know the leadership, and if they don't trust you right now, that's a warning sign before the ransomware attack even hits. So I know it's hard, AI is hard, cybersecurity is hard, that's why you're getting paid the big bucks, right? But the bottom line is, you've got to be someone who's trusted by senior leadership and can get to yes before the ransomware attack hits, because when it hits, your level of trust and the level that they believe in you will determine whether you're the one helping your company, helping your government get out of that. So with that, I think we're out of time, so thank you all very much.
Thank you.